So today I want to go over the requirements for your last formal writing assignment that you will do for this class, and it is a paper for part of our 1984 unit. The type of paper, it's called a summary and response, and before I even get into the requirements, you should know that a summary and response paper is an incredibly common type of paper that you might see in your first year of college. Mrs. Garbowitz and I worked on this, and we took some of the requirements back a little bit in order to make it more appropriate for a high school junior. But we both know that this is an incredibly common assignment that you're likely to see in your first year of college, and so we thought that it would be a good idea to expose you to this type of writing right now. So it's like I said, it's a summary and response, and basically it's going to ask you to summarize an article that you choose and that you read, and then to respond to it using your knowledge of both the article and, in this case, your knowledge of 1984. This paper is worth 50 points. It is going to be between 750 and 1,000 words. That is a strict word count, so please do not go under or over, as it will impact your grade. The paper is going to require you to read a recent news article, summarize it, and then respond to it. Okay, so here's how it's going to sort of break down. And it's broken down into steps because I think, one, that's going to make your life a bit easier if you take this step by step instead of trying to digest the whole thing all at once. But also so that I can check in with you along the way and make sure that you are on the right track in terms of the process. So the very first thing that I want you to do, step one here, is to find an article, a news article, probably an opinion piece, from a credible source, and I want you to find one that criticizes a political policy. All right? This is an article that needs to have been written within the last 10 years, so it needs to be semi-recent, and also it can be about a policy from any place in the world. This does not have to be U.S. politics. It can be global politics. It can be from any country in the world and any policy that those countries might have. What you're looking for specifically is an article that criticizes a policy as being either Orwellian, totalitarian, or fascist. Now, you should already know what totalitarian and fascist are because those were on the web quest that you did long ago. You might not be familiar with the term Orwellian, but basically Orwellian is a term that's used to describe something that sounds like it could have been written by George Orwell in 1984. So, for example, if you read an article about a specific policy that comes from North Korea, it might be described as Orwellian, meaning it might sound like something that is so dystopian that it seems like Orwell made it up himself. Okay, so you're going to look for an article that criticizes some policy from some country, either this one or another, as being Orwellian, totalitarian, or fascist. You need to get your article approved by me by either the 18th or the 19th, depending on whether I see you on A days or B days. Okay, so that's all you need to do first is find an article. All right. Once you have an article that you think is going to work, you're going to put it into this chart, and you're going to choose your appropriate block at the bottom, and you're going to put your last name, your first name, the title of your article, and in this box you're going to include a link to the article that you are choosing to read. That way I can click on the link, I can check the article out, and see if it's going to work. As soon as I decide that it's going to work, I will put either a yes or a no in this box, and you'll be good to go, or you'll need to find a different article. So by May 18th or 19th. Now you don't have to wait till then. You can do this anytime before then. That's just the deadline. Once you have an article that you've chosen and that you've read several times for firm understanding, the next thing that you're going to do is to write a summary of that article. Your summary should include the title of the article. It should include the author's name. It should summarize the author's main argument, his or her supporting arguments, and any evidence that they use. That summary needs to be between 200 and 250 words. In other words, it needs to be long enough to cover like the most important stuff, but not so long that it takes up the majority of your paper. Your summary is due to me by the 24th or the 25th, depending on whether I see you on A days or B days. It's also going to be part of your final paper because this is a summary and response paper, but I'm having you turn in the summary ahead of time so that I can check it out, make sure you're on the right track, and offer you any feedback before you go further. So, you've got this article, and it claims that some policy is totalitarian, and you've read it and you've summarized it. The next part is the response. And in your response, you're basically going to say one of two things. You're either going to say, yes, the author is correct. The policy that the author talks about in this article is in fact Orwellian, and here's how I know. And you're going to show me examples of things that happened in 1984 and show me how they're similar to the actual real-world policy that the author describes in the article. Or you're going to summarize the article and you're going to say, actually, no, this author is wrong. The policy that this author is talking about is not Orwellian. It's not totalitarian. It's not fascist. And I know that because I've read 1984. And this is what totalitarian looks like. This is what Orwellian looks like. Okay? So in other words, you're basically either going to agree with the author of the article that you read, or you're going to disagree with the author of the article that you read. However, you're not going to do that in a way that is personal. Okay? You're not actually going to say, I agree with the author or I disagree with the author. But you're going to point out either that the author is correct or that the author is making claims that are false or inaccurate, one way or another. So, using what you know about 1984, write a response to the article you just summarized. In the first couple sentences, you need to either support what the article you read says, or you need to reject what the article says. So in other words, once again, you're either agreeing with what the article says, or you're disagreeing with what the article says about how a specific government policy is Orwellian, totalitarian, or fascist. Once you've done that, you're going to use several specific examples from 1984 to strengthen your position. This is the most important part of your paper. This is where you're doing analysis. This is where you're doing synthesis of the article and the book, and you're bringing everything together. And you're either supporting or rejecting the author's claims. This needs to be at least 500 words. So if you have a 250-word summary and a 500-word response, now you're at 750 words, which is the minimum requirement for the paper. This last piece right here is more of a reminder than a requirement, I guess, but you should remember that the summary and response are not two separate papers. It should be one seamless piece of writing that starts with a summary of the article and then transitions into talking about whether or not the article is accurate in terms of its criticism. I'm just asking you to turn the summary in ahead of time so that I can check in on you and see how you're doing. Your final product, which is a summary and lit focus response, is due on either the 2nd of June or the 5th of June, depending on whether I see you on B days or C days. Okay? So you'll be finishing 1984 as we're working on the papers. For format, of course, it's always MLA every single time. I'm not going to go over that. You know how to do it, or you know how to figure it out. And then that's pretty much it. Your Works Cited page will have two things on it. It will have the article that you read, and it will have 1984. You'll also have in-text citations, I'm sure, for both, because you will be quoting from them directly. You will have some class time to work on this, but you will also need to work on it outside of class time, and you'll need to make sure that you're meeting every deadline. You need to have an article chosen by the time that I've told you. You need to have a summary done by the time that I've told you, okay, so that you can move on and then ultimately do the rest of your paper. And of course, the most important deadline is this right here, to have the final product turned in by June 2nd or 5th. The last thing that I want to point out to you on Classroom is this right here. So this is not a perfect graphic, but it's one that I think is useful because it shows how many common news sources, what their biases are. So over here you have news sources, some of which you couldn't even really call news sources, but you have internet sources that are extremely liberal with their bias. And so for that reason, they're probably not going to give you a really great article to work with because the bias is going to be so strong that it's not even close to doing an objective report on whatever the news might be. Same thing over here. Here are some websites that are incredibly conservative and will be so biased that any information that comes from them is not credible. In the middle, you have your mainstream media. Okay, you have things like NPR, BBC, the Washington Post, the New York Times, so on and so forth. And then you can see up here that as you go this way, it gets slightly more liberal. As you go this way, it gets slightly more conservative. Okay, you want to try, if you can, to find an article that comes from the middle. All right, because if you find something that's super far to the right or super far to the left, it's not going to be a real credible source, first of all, and it's going to be one probably full of a lot of bad logic and not a lot of hard evidence. So we want to try and find credible news sources that will make for a strong academic piece of writing. So try your best to find a source that comes from here. And once again, once you've found an article that you think is going to work, go ahead and put it into this spreadsheet under your block, and I will either approve it or tell you to find something else, and then you can read it and begin working on your summary. That's it. Today in class, you're going to be working on finding an article that you can use for your paper, and if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email or catch up with me the next time that I see you.